My art is an extension of my life in general. So I'm probably more of a storyteller than I see myself as an artist. It's just the medium that I use in which to tell stories. We are all the lead roles in our own movie. You can just change the script if you want to.
When you talk about self-improvement, are you referring to just strictly your art or just your life in general?
Never give up your childish sense of curiosity and your willingness to learn.
I'm Elina Reddy and welcome to Foreign Influence. Qualities in the business person.
Yes, it's within us. It was ashamed of to something.
Like music where I'll tell a story. Give it
What's happening?
Your life can be better.
Happiness is about having a good time, it's about joy.
The girl will go along a faith show.
And the challenge is... I'm Elina Reddy and welcome to Foreign Influence. Today we will be chatting to renowned Australian artist Dagmar Cyrulla. We are very blessed because she invited us into her beautiful home and her amazing studio where we're going to see how the magic happens. Dagmar, thank you so much for having us today.
Oh, thank you so much for coming, Elena.
You are so busy. You're not only a figurative artist, but you're also a sculptor. How did that come about?
It was several years ago that I really wanted to make something in three-dimensional form. And it's so different to painting because you have to keep turning it and it has to work from underneath and above and from all angles. But it informs your paintings. And I love it. I love the tactility of it. And
texture.
Yeah, so I use plasticine and I use wax to make the sculptures. Yeah.
And then it turns into bronze eventually.
Yes. I think also the fact that it's a single figure and I'm sort of interested in putting two figures together now, so it's sort of an extension of my painting in a way.
How would you describe yourself as an artist?
That's a trick question, Elena. Let me think about that. How would I describe myself as an artist? I don't know if I get my identity from being an artist. It's just something that I do. I guess my work is painterly and I want to tell stories. So I'm probably more of a storyteller than I see myself as an artist. It's just the medium that I use in which to tell stories. I've always painted and drawn. My husband complains all the time because I don't watch television without drawing. So he actually puts foreign TV on so that I have to read the subtitles and be present.
How would you describe the genre that you paint in? Or you would say you don't have a genre, you just paint what you paint?
I'm a figurative painter, and the kinds of stories that I tell are about how we relate to one another. Things like being German, my grandmother, and I lived with my grandparents when I was 6. My grandmother used to say sort of strange sayings, I don't know if you have them back in your country, but like a bad bird cries out of its own nest. Or I know she used to look through the blinds and she'd laugh and quip that somebody hadn't turned their lights off so that they could be seen sticky beaking at the neighbours. Everybody knew what everybody was doing. There's a painting that I've got which is The Grass is Greener, where you're looking through at the neighbours. The big painting that I did for the Dobell Drawing Prize, which was called The Keeper of Secrets, was to do with that.
I love the name, The Keeper of Secrets.
Yeah, well, it was to do with the dog was representative of silence and loyalty. Dogs are always represented in my paintings as being loyal. It was a young girl coming of age, realising her femininity and reflecting back on how her parents are and the relationship that her parents have. I guess because my dad always said, coming from a from Germany to Australia, he always enforced family and marriage as the unity of and importance of marriage. And then they went through divorce, and it was kind of like my whole world was turned on end. And
Were you in primary school
no,
then,
I
or
was,
high
I
school?
was older. I was living in Annandale. I was studying art at that stage. It was complicated, and I think it makes you realise that life is complicated, and everyone's just muddling their way through life and just learning. So I have a couple of things where I think never give up your childish sense of curiosity and your willingness to learn. And I hope that my paintings reflect those stories, so things that I've witnessed or thought about, and allows people to bring their own narratives to the paintings in which they can then tell their stories.
Wow, this is a really big piece. I feel like in your paintings there is a lot of, almost like an intrusion into someone's world. You make it so personal and a lot of vulnerability I see.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's that kind of voyeuristic feeling, I guess. I have to be emotionally connected with what I'm trying to convey in the painting or the drawing to get me through all the kind of technical and formal challenges in a work. So this drawing I think I worked on for 6 months.
Wow.
And Elina was my model. The wedding ring is very specific. She's very strong. It's called I Am. So it's pastel on paper with acrylic.
I am, so that's like really empowering.
Yeah, and it was done around the time of, the Me Too movement, and I think I like women, I guess like yourself, that are strong, confident, stand in their power, but are also very feminine.
Yeah, I love the dripping effect. That's amazing. Yeah, it's beautiful.
So there's a whole lot of pastel work, I guess, working back into it, spraying it, and then I go over it with acrylic to kind of, if I've made a mistake, wash it back, wipe it back.
And I love how you sign your name. You have to find it in the painting.
Oh yeah?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
that's good. So my family, I guess, has had a lot of influence on my work in that sense. And I think also just going to people's places and realising that they do things differently. They don't have lard for breakfast on their sandwiches. They don't have salami and mortadella. The father isn't always the patriarch like it was in my family, and my mother cooked, except my father did make breakfast occasionally. But you have these ways of relatedness that you think is normal, but it's only when you're given an alternative view, or you see that other people have a different relationship or relatedness, that you get clarity, and then you can make your choice. If you don't have clarity that there is a difference and that there are other things that you can choose, then you just muddle your way through life until some catastrophe happens and you're like the wall and the donkey hits, and you can keep hitting that wall, or you could have an epiphany and a realisation to go on to that next level. I guess I'm really interested in self-improvement. Yeah, just what makes us human.
So when you talk about self-improvement, are you referring to just strictly your art or just your life in general?
Well, I think my art is an extension of my life in general. It's sort of sad these days that the internet doesn't allow people to make mistakes. It kind of holds you true to something you've said 20 years ago. But I think people have the ability to learn and grow. I love people like Dr. Wayne Dyer, Anthony Robbins, anyone that talks about how you can transform yourself.
Motivational speakers.
Yes,
Yep.
And I think through that you have to kind of reflect on life, and you have to reflect on how we relate to one another. And I'm not saying I've got all the answers. I mean, I'm as flawed as the next person, but I think I really like to look at life and how we are, and the complications between a father and daughter relationship, and mine was always kind of quite angst ridden because I tried to prove myself, European kind of dads. It's a little bit like you're trying to prove yourself, and there were always double standards. The man's meant to go out and procreate, the woman's meant to save herself for marriage. I guess I had an upbringing that kind of pushed me to look and to find things, which hopefully my paintings reflect.
To me, there is no doubt that they do that. Dagmar, this room is amazing.
Most of the work here is work that I've sort of swapped and some purchased. And then when work comes back from an exhibition, I just hang it on the wall and move things around the house. That's a self-portrait. As I told you, I do many self-portraits through the year for hand-eye coordination, but also just a sense of self-reflection. And they're never any easier than the next. I think I mentioned to you I end up throwing out more than I keep. So that's self-portrait with yellow shirt. This was sort of a homage to Edward Hopper's work. I love Edward Hopper and Eric Fischl, and I love a lot of artists, Velázquez. And this one's called The Hotel Room After Hopper. And there was a mask for COVID, and it was to do with the quarantine during COVID. And this one's called Groundhog Day. Again, it was a COVID piece. It's a bronze.
You mentioned that self-portraits never get any easier. Why do you think is that? Is that because each time you get more and more demanding on yourself, or what do you think is the reason?
Maybe we have a preconceived idea of how we look. And so it's almost like you have to be present with the shapes, the tone, and where they're placed to see it rather than to interpret in your mind how it should look. Like we always think a nose looks like a nose. But if you look at some of Velázquez's paintings, they're extraordinary because they're like marks with the right tone, the right shape, and the right placement. And up close, they almost look like abstract works.
Yeah.
But when you go back, they actually make sense. And I think there's always that thing of, do you paint flesh or do you paint skin? So you've got to make some choices. Sometimes you're not completely present with the work that you're doing, and it's just part of trying to practice your skills. Yeah, there's a number of reasons, I think, why that is. They're fun to do, and you always learn something, and sometimes they fall off the brush. So, yeah.
You were born in Germany. Which city was it?
I was born in Winterlingen in Ebbingen, or the Ingens not far from Stuttgart. It's the south of Germany, I guess, yeah.
And you came here to Australia with your parents and your brother and sister at the age of 2.
Yes, so my father came first and discovered Australia for the sunshine and the blue sky. And
he must have been here in summer.
Obviously, and it wasn't in Melbourne, obviously.
Yes.
And he just loved it. And in those days, they really admired a trade. And he was, apart from being a musician, because my father was a conductor and played 6 instruments and had the most amazing voice.
Incredible.
As does my mum, she has a brilliant voice. They used to sing together like the family Von Trapp. But when Dad first came, the government would give you money and you had to work for that money, sweeping, picking up rocks on the airport or on farms. And he loved it.
That's hard work.
It's really hard work. And then he went back to Germany. He met my mother when they were performing. His band was performing. And they got married, had my sister and myself. And my father, his dream was always to come back to Australia, because we're a lucky country. Like Australia's a fabulous, multicultural, beautiful country. We're so fortunate. They came and it was pretty tough because I think the company that brought him closed shortly after he arrived. And then he started his own business. I remember when he was cold calling, he cold called and came to this company and said, look, I can service your balances and things. And the guy said, well, the guy who does our balances is here at the moment, so come and meet him. Dad was a little bit embarrassed because he was trying to steal his business. But Mr. Davis, who sort of became like my de facto dad, Mr. and Mrs. Davis were great, gave my dad business. And so then they started. But
terrific.
We had some tough times. I remember one time we weren't going to be able to afford to get Christmas presents because Dad hadn't been paid and the money came through at the last minute. So, but we always had chickens and vegetables and,
And at the age of 6, you went to Germany to live with your grandmother.
Yeah, I think that had a huge influence on me actually because my grandfather loved the way I told stories. So I think I was 5, I must have turned 6 when I came back. And he asked if I could go and meet my grandmother who was too scared of flying. I think I did a lot of reflecting on why my parents sent me, and having had conversations now that I'm older, they said they wanted to give me that opportunity. But it was a strange thing because my brother and sister stayed here because my brother was born in Australia, I went on my own. I went to school there. Then I was naughty. I remember being naughty. And next minute my father was there and came and took me back. But I remember having him all to myself on the plane, and yeah, it was a strange thing. I think it really impacted how I see the world and the reflecting that I do. I couldn't speak English when I came back. So
That must have been very challenging.
I really feel for people that come to another country. Language is such an important part, I think, of our society. Communication, how we communicate.
Dagmar, this is very, very personal, this painting and the sculpture work. And I'm really sorry about your loss.
Well, Elena, thank you for your condolences. My father passed away end of February this year, but this was done when he was in a coma through COVID, and so we got away through some of COVID and went to Europe, and I was inspired by Rodin's Gates of Hell. It's a self-portrait. I do a lot of self-portraits throughout the year. Some make it, most of them get thrown out. And it was a work just contemplating life. It was about thinking a lot about my father, not being able to go and see him in hospital. All of my work, I change my colour palette quite a lot to try and create the mood that I'm looking for. And so I keep a comprehensive record in some of these sketchbooks of all the colours. So that's typically some of my colour palettes. I'm usually always in the studio, but when I'm not in the studio, I do these small kind of studies in my sketchbook. And I keep notes. So for the sculpture, I do lots of drawings and just keep notes for myself as to what I'm interested in, what my thought process is, so that I can come back to it. These are my sketchbooks from when I'm in the house, and some of them start with pencil and then they get worked up with oil paint or acrylic. I usually work from life as well as from photographs. I find that sometimes when the model's not here, I mean, it's great to work from life because photographs tend to flatten the image, but when the model isn't here, I can be more present with the poetry that I'm trying to create. And often I throw a lot of things out if they don't work, and sometimes it's just amazing and they do work. There's a little boy in the gallery overseas. So things that interest me, multiple figure compositions, sort of interested in large scale figures, sculptures, relief sculptures. And then that way it just triggers my memory when I'm looking to do a painting. I used to rip these books up and sell the individual drawings. I think I'll keep this particular one that I've just completed. So that's basically what I do. But I love drawing. I see myself more as a drawer, in fact. That's my sister, than a painter. And I'm trying to keep the drawings back into my paintings now, experimenting with acrylic and acrylic marker and then oils.
How would you compare German culture versus Australian culture?
I think when people come to Australia, they're probably more German than the Germans. I'll just speak about Germany because that's what I know to be authentic. My dad was very strict, so in the town in which he grew up, he said if you were smoking, the whole village could come and reprimand you and just smack you across the head.
So we're really like embedded into that community.
Correct, yeah. And it was okay. I mean, I think discipline's important, but obviously not to that degree. Some accountability these days would be good. So I had very strict parents, and that was a cultural thing, you know, especially with the girls. You had to control them. And I don't think I was allowed out to a friend's house until I was 12. And I remember it's embedded in my mind because we used to go to the delicatessen, and so for breakfast we would have, I don't know, did you do this? Like you had lots of unusual foods like mortadella and salami and schmaltz, which is lard.
And different types of cheeses.
Different cheeses and a smoked trout, and that was our breakfast. And I remember waking up with this friend of mine in their house, and they offered me dippity eggs.
Well, it could have been Weet-Bix.
What is dippity eggs? Weet-Bix, exactly. Well, I think that was an option. And it had like, they called them toast fingers, and they cut their little white bread into like toast fingers, and you dipped it into like an egg. And it was the first time I realised that you can do things differently, and it doesn't always have to be the way your parents are. So
you can create your own culture.
You can create your own truth. I mean, we are all the lead roles in our own movie. And so whatever you believe is your truth, that's your reality. Okay, so I guess I got that you can just change the script if you want to. So we've called this house Maison Berbisi to reference our place in Dijon where I paint. So I've been self-funding kind of a residency in Dijon. It's an hour and a half from Paris. I think my grandfather on my mother's side was French, hence I feel this incredible pull to France, and both France and Germany. Funde Foundry asked me to do a commission for them, and it was with David and Dee Carabo. They met through dance and movement, and he was designing his house in Brighton. It's a larger than life size bronze, so it's the first piece that I'd done like that, so it was exciting. Women, sculpting women.
Were you a little bit nervous?
Of course, I was very nervous. So I did a whole lot of drawings, I did some little maquettes, and then we finally came up with this one, which I've altered into like a candelabra. But the life-size piece was meant to be like the Barcelona pavilion. So you come in, and from the entry and from every aspect of the house, you can see my dancing figure. And it was also meant to humanize the space.
Dagmar, at what age you started to feel that art was your path in life?
I had some really good teachers in high school. So Margarete Formanek, who I'm still friends with. I went to Tara Girls' School first, and then I went to Oak Hill College in my year 11 and 12 in Sydney. And Margarete was a great teacher. So I was 18 or 17. And she would put aside her time on weekends to take us to museums.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, because as much as my parents having been creative, like Mum used to sew all our clothes, we'd do craft things together, macrame, and make music, they never went to galleries. I think that's when I really loved art and had an insight into that. It was when I finished in high school, I didn't know if I wanted to be a singer or if I wanted to be a painter. I did a couple of auditions and then kind of realised that that wasn't me and I wanted to paint. But I took up printmaking because I remember at the University of Western Sydney, because I had such a sheltered upbringing, it wasn't until a friend of mine, Danielle Hatherley, who now paints in America, was painting out of her garage and making money from her art that I realised that you could make money out of your art. So it was a couple of things, I guess, that helped.
Out of all the Australian exhibitions that we have, the prizes, the Archibald Prize that you have been a finalist of multiple times, which one is the dearest to you?
I mean, I think I heard you interview Wendy, and I have to agree with her. The only thing you can control is entering.
Okay.
You put your best work in at any given time. But there's been some great prizes. They've really helped getting my work out there. The Naked and Nude, the Archibald, the Doug Moran. The Leicester Prize was great. That's where I met Abdullah for the first time. So you meet other artists as well. They're great to have, so long as you keep them in perspective and realise that, you know, they're curating a show, they can be political, and you just treat them as fun, I think.
Dagmar, thank you so much for your time and for having us in your beautiful studio, and we wish you all the best for your future endeavours.
Thank you so much, Elena. It's been a pleasure.